Thank you so much for tuning into my show, William Wallace for America. My guest today is running for Congress in Louisiana. He's District 6, if I have that right for the second time, and he is going to answer some questions not only about his district, about him, but how voting, doing the right thing in his district in the state of Louisiana is going to be doing the right thing for our country. As you know, I always say that I believe that the best thing that we can do to fix our country is to start in our own communities. And I think my guest today, who's running for Congress, is going to do just that. Larry Davis III, how are you doing, my friend?
I'm doing quite well, Mr. Wallace. Good to be here.
Well, I tell you what, not only great to be here, but great to spend some time with you because I've gotten a chance to know you before the interview, and of course working in Louisiana together and knowing how passionate you are about not only Louisiana but about our country. And I'm making those ties intentionally several times here because Congress is kind of a unique position. You know,
Mhm.
your job is to represent the people in our state, in our community or a district in our state, to do the right thing for the people in our state, but also your votes reflect the direction of our country and
That's right.
how the country. So you have a unique representation. You got to represent your district, but you got to make the right vote for our country too. So my questions are going to reflect some of that. But Larry, let's get started. Tell me about you. Let's introduce you to the people of Louisiana, but to our country, so people in the country will know to support you.
Yes, William, thank you for the question. I'm an average American. I work a normal 40-hour work week job in the medical sector. I'm a person who's always been a problem solver. And I say this because a lot of people like to say they chose where they end up at. Well, God providentially has placed me in every area in my life. And so I've always had service to be a passion of mine, which is why I started a nonprofit called We the People. And We the People is a nonprofit that promotes American first policies and that provides scholarships to students to continue to grow and expand their American dream. Um, I am a member of the Livingston Parish Republican Executive Committee. I serve as the secretary there, and I also serve as the governor board of election supervisors appointed by the governor. And so my life has always been about advocating for right against wrong. Because the logic that I have is a lot of the problems that we see in our world today are because we have individuals who lack the character to be in representative government. And so I've just always had opinions. That's all I can say. I've always had opinions about what should be done, but also have been placed in unique opportunities to be able to implement those opinions. And so, born in Baton Rouge, went to Glen Oaks Park Elementary School, went to Woodlawn Middle, and graduated from Denham Springs High School in 2015. Was class president my junior year. And now, when I graduated as Mr. Denham Springs High School. So, once again, that's just adjust. I don't do good bragging about myself, William. That's what it's like. Well, what do you want to know? But that's the
What's
just.
interesting is it's you know what's interesting is that shows that you're a humble person. I actually had this conversation in a previous interview. Where she said, "I hate talking about myself because I feel like I'm bragging."
Yeah.
It just shows that you're humble, and and you don't want to sound like you're being braggadocious because you're talking about yourself. But where did you after high school? Where did you go to college?
So actually, so that's a good question too. So I went 2 years to Southeastern Louisiana University to major in social studies education first. And then I looked at the way that education was going, and I knew that my ideas would not be welcomed in the classroom. They weren't teaching pride in America. In fact, in my tenure, I subbed a little bit just to get a feel for things. And there was an instance to where a student um, didn't stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. And I couldn't rationalize that. I couldn't rationalize why an individual would not stand for the pledge. And so I saw the trajectory of where our country was going and where our education system was going. And I said, you know what, this may not be the place where I need to be. And so I switched my major to political science, went 2 years into that major, COVID hit, or the Great Flood hit. And so both my mom and my dad's home flooded.
Mm.
And so I had to make a decision. And so I just went full time into the workforce, worked for a nonprofit that dealt with teaching students to choose to make better decisions and better choices. Before I went and worked in industry at Turner Industries, where I was in maintenance, and then I went on to do cost projection. And then from there, I went into working in the medical field. And so I've had a myriad. I've also even worked at Benny's Car Wash. So I've had a myriad of different career opportunities. But now I'm back. I'm actually back at Southeastern part time because that's a personal goal of mine to finish that degree.
But I'm going to go back to the nonprofit because it sounds like you got
Yes.
a lot of good education. I'm going to go
Yes.
back to the nonprofit that you do. Can you tell us about that?
Mine, the one that I created.
Yes, the one you created. Yes.
Yes. So We the People, we started that last year. And so I went to my RPEC, the Livingston Parish RPEC, which is so supportive of everything that I do. I mean, if I bring them an idea, they support it, they're behind me, and they help me make it a reality. And so last year I said, you know what? I said, we don't have a 4th of July parade in Livingston Parish. And this is a holiday that unites Americans around one common theme and one common ancestry and one common history, and that is America. And so I went to my RPEC and I said, look, I said, I want to start a parade and a nonprofit that its board is made up of 1 or 2 representatives from each of the Republican committees in Livingston. So we have Republican women representative, which is the Liberty Bells. We have the Republican Women, the Daytime Club, as we call it. We have 3 representatives from there. We have 2 representatives from the Livingston Parish RPEC on there, and we have representatives from the Livingston Parish Young Republican. We have 1 representative from there. And so we collectively came together to start the parade first as a fundraiser. We wanted to raise money to be able to sponsor Young Patriots, but also to expand the conservative message throughout Livingston Parish to make sure that conservatism is sustained, because we are not doing a good job at elaborating our message to voters as to why they need to join the Republican Party or why they need to support conservative values. And so last year, with a prayer and walking by faith, the committee and we launched our first parade. And if anybody who knows how you do parades, you don't know how much support you're going to get until the day of the parade. I mean,
That's right.
that's literally how it is. And we right before we started, I think we had 10 entries. By the time we rolled onto the main street in Watson, Louisiana, we had over 20 entries into our parade. We didn't think anybody was going to show up because most people in our community travel for 4th of July because they have no reason to stay. The roads were packed. It was almost 2,000 people on the route. And so God blessed us abundantly in that. And it's growing. We're still planning it this year. So you talk about running a campaign, planning a 4th of July parade, and I'm a member of RPEC. We're also planning our Republican Executive Committee Day at the Capitol. That is something I started last year as well, that brings all of the RPECs together into Baton Rouge so that we can go onto the Capitol, testify on bills, connect together, and grow the conservative movement. And so that's just been my heart, is expanding conservative values. But where there is a problem, I don't want to sit by. I don't want to complain about it. I want to bring solutions to be able to solve those issues. So God has just blessed.
Yeah, I'm gonna ask you a couple more things because before I start going some congressional questions here that I ask all my congressional candidates on my show. But what I'm enjoying hearing about you, because when as you're talking about yourself and the things that you do, and a little bit let people know who you are very passionate.
Yeah.
You get excited when you talk about community work. You get excited when I hear you talk about things that matters of the heart. You're passionate about your faith. You're passionate about America. You're passionate about your community, all of which I think are really important. I want to ask you real quick. You mentioned earlier, when we first started the interview, about a nonprofit to get involved education. Did I miss something?
No, so I actually work for a nonprofit. It's a national organization called Students Against Disruptive Decisions. And so that nonprofit dealt with me going into the schools. I was the program facilitator and then program specialist. And so my job really emphasized on driving safely. And so we would go into schools and teach high school students. We would do a program called Rock the Belt. And so this would be a timed relay for students to be at each door of the car. And when we say go, they would see how fast they could buckle up in each seat, and they would travel to each door. And I didn't do that by myself. The CEO of that company, Dylan Ivey, did a phenomenal job with that. And me and him were close friends throughout that process. And so learned a great deal from there. And the main mission was to encourage seatbelt safety. But I also had the opportunity where we got some grants to talk about opioid abuse and human trafficking. And so those were some of the things that I was able to go into the elementary schools and into our junior highs and into our high schools and teach students about those very real life topics, but that there are alternative choices other than choosing what everybody else does.
One more question before I start asking you some of those tough congressional questions. You brought up a dirty word a few minutes ago, and I gotta call you out on it.
Let's do it.
You brought up conservatism. The reason I say it's a dirty word, I of course I'm joking about it, is that the political left has vilified conservatism. They make conservatism sound like it's a bad thing. They pin conservatism on to go along with the Christian right, who they also vilify, and they make it sound like to be conservative. And look, don't get me wrong, I get a little upset that the Republican Party stole the word conservative, because the conservatives like to say, well, I'm a conservative. I'm not just a Republican, I'm a conservative. And in that process, they have made people that are Democrats think it's not only bad, but alienate them in a way that I think that people don't realize. That I meet many Democrats, that people don't realize that Democrats are actually more conservative, or some Democrats are more conservative than Republicans. There are many people who vote. Let me back up and say it a little bit differently. There are many Democrats who vote Democrat because they don't realize that they're actually more conservative. They don't realize that conservatism is family values, it's faith, it's safe communities, it's opportunities for everybody, it's empowerment of the individual to be able to succeed in life without the need of government.
Yes.
And it's explaining to people that, hey, look, if you believe in these things, let me help you break away from that government control, or let me help break you away from those one issues that make you vote Democrat, which is actually voting against your conservative values. So let's talk about that for 1 second before I ask you some other questions. How are you going to be able to inform people that, hey, look, I might have an R behind my name, but my values actually align more with people in your district, because you're a heavy Democrat district, if I remember right?
Yes.
If you want to talk about that more, you're welcome to. But you're in a Democrat district that was kind of carved out, right? Let's face it. That Democrat was that little district was carved out, and it's in contention right now. If people want to look it up, they can, they can look up what's going on with it. It's part of a multi-state thing, but that's the gist of it. How are you going to reach out to those voters and say, look, conservatism is not a dirty word, and you might be more conservative than you realize? I'll let you go with that. I
Yes.
went on too
So
long. I'm sorry.
no. So the greatest thing about living in Louisiana is we have Democrats who are pro-life and they vote that way. And so a lot of the social
Katrina
issues
Jackson.
outside of Orleans, Democrats vote conservatively in our state.
Right.
But I will hearken on this. A lot of people look at the heavy Democrat system, and this is my problem with the map because it says, which I get the logic behind it, but it's not really logical. It says that we're going to rig a section of a map that's
Gerrymander.
majority black, gerrymander, that's majority black, and that is registered Democrat. Well, in the state of Louisiana, that's not how that works. The parish that I reside in now, guess what? It's still majority registered Democrat, but votes Trump overwhelmingly. So they didn't do their homework when they drew these maps like this. Over the course,
Don't tell him that. Don't tell him that.
over the course, I know I'm giving secrets, but over
Yeah.
the course of our campaign, William, nobody asks me what my political party is. Nobody asks
Do
me
they
about the president.
assume anything, you think?
No, because if they
Okay.
would assume, I think it would be met with disrespect. And that's what I'm
Okay.
getting at. And there has
Yeah.
been no disrespect nowhere, even in East Baton Rouge when we're touring schools and talking to people. You know why? Because people are not defined by a political party. They're defined by their character, and they look at other people and their character to determine if I want to vote for someone. And I'm going to preach on this one for a little bit because I talked about it a little bit with some Teen Pack kids. I spoke this earlier today, and they were asking about how do we change voter apathy in our country? We stop electing crooks. We start electing individuals who actually mean what they say.
Mhm.
Because right now, the American electorate doesn't go vote because they don't know how to vote. They don't know what voting means. They don't go vote because they don't feel like it matters. They don't feel like anything in their life has changed. They feel like they've heard the talk time and time again. They elect
Mhm.
someone, he says he's going to do it, she says she's going to do it. They get in there, the individual gets richer, they get poor. Why go vote if nothing is going to change? I'm going to spend time with my family and with my church members and pray that the Lord comes back quicker. That's the mentality of the American. I'm here to say to the American people that real change can happen when you allow yourself and allow your name to be put on the ballot. We need righteous men and women who are unafraid of the noise, unafraid of what the world has made to look insurmountable, to sacrifice and run for office. And remember that this country was founded by unordinary men who
Right.
had unordinary conviction, who beat the world's greatest superpower at the time. Imagine beating China or Russia with no gun, with only muskets, and you only have a population of what, 100,000 people, and they did it because God honored their faith. And so we need to lift back up the hearts and minds of this country and let them know that it is us, the American people, who determine where we go. The second part of your question, you said, how do we get that message about conservatism? We tell them, you actually are married to a woman and a man. You are in a traditional marriage. What made you decide to do that? You decided to keep your child and not abort it. And I would hearken to say, if I asked you, would you abort your child? You would say no. That's a conservative principle. You pay your taxes and you believe that everything that you work for, you should be able to keep. And you get upset when the government takes more than what they get, and yet your life doesn't grow. That's a conservative principle.
Mhm.
You don't agree that men should be in the same bathroom as your granddaughter or as your daughter or as your niece. It's a conservative value. And I would even hearken to say that conservatism is not republicanism, because a lot of republicanism is accepting of non-traditional values. That's not who I am. The conservative principles mean we want to preserve the traditional Christian values that founded this country. That's it. And it's what everybody practices. It's not saying, the liberals like to say, well, you're forcing it. We're not forcing our religion. We're just saying that we define the word. If we define marriage, marriage has a definition. You can't change the definition of a word like you're trying to do with male and female.
Mhm.
Marriage has a definition. It's between one man and one woman.
Right.
If two homosexual couples want to get unionized, come up with your own word. Call
Right.
it union. Call it partnership. Go fight for it like you do. Don't call it marriage. It's not marriage. It's
Right.
not. So most common sense Americans will agree with that. We're not attacking their lifestyle. They have reconciled their choice with their creator, with their maker, whatever they're doing. But don't redefine words that you didn't create. Don't
Right.
redefine traditions that you were not a part of. And most Americans, most Louisianians are Christian before they're anything else. And so every person that we meet, every legislative official, every real person, every student, they don't care about party, William. They want to survive. And they
Right.
want an advocate that's going to go to Washington
Yep.
and advocate for them. They really don't spend much time worried about, because they've been failed by both parties. They've been failed.
Right.
And like I've told people, they don't. I went and toured a school. They didn't say, "Oh, can you write us a bill to give us raises?" They didn't say that. They
No.
didn't say, "Oh, can you give us a 4-day work week?" You know what they cared about? How do we get our children into this classrooms and stay?
Right.
The track
Mm.
coach said, "Sir, we need hurdles." But yet we have legislators on both sides of the house. Let's give them raises. They won't. No. Stop legislating from your imagination. Go
Right.
sit and talk with the people who work in those
That's
professions
right.
and let them tell you what they need. And I guarantee you it's $50 million cheaper than what you're coming up with.
I
So messaging.
no. Look, I would love to just let you talk because you're so passionate and informative. But but I do have some questions I want to ask you, and I want to make sure I get those out. But before I
Yes.
do that, I want to thank my sponsor, Patriot Mobile, for making this show possible. And if you believe in America as much as I love, look, Larry, I know you love America. I can tell by the flag over your left shoulder and the cross over your right shoulder. And Patriot Mobile has those exact same values. They believe in God, family, country, and people can get a discount with a company on their cell phone service that loves America as much as we do. Go to patriotmobile.com/WWFA. They got some specials there if you use that promo code WWFA. So we talked about your district, and look, I jokingly said it was gerrymandered, I mean, and a lot, but and I love how you talk about how you pointed out that, look, even sometimes, they weren't paying attention. So it's actually votes Republican at times. And so I hope it does this next time also. But where is that district? Can you kind of describe how that district kind of meanders like a bayou through the state?
So it
Wait,
goes
so it's not
from
gerrymandered, it's actually boudreauxed, but that's
it is Boudreaux and Thibodeau. So it starts in North Baton Rouge. So think from where McKinley High is. We don't have McKinley High. McKinley High is CD5. So it cuts up, and right everything after McKinley we have. So it meanders through North Baton Rouge, capital Struma, goes to Baker, goes to Zachary, swoops to the left, crosses the river. We get Port Allen, we get New Roads, we get Livonia, we get Opelousas, we get Pineville, Cheneyville, we get Eunice, Karen Crow, North Lafayette, we get Alexandria, Shreveport, we get Morrow, we get Port Bear, we get Um, I think I'm hitting all the big ones. We get
Do you get Clucherville?
I think
It's
Clucherville
the south
maybe
side of
too.
Natchitoches. You gotta look that up.
Yes,
So
we do. We have Natchitoches. We have the south
okay,
side of Natchitoches. We have all of Natchitoches.
okay.
That's one that we have all of. So that's probably those areas are probably more just like we said before, Elbert Guillory won 10 of the 13 districts against Cleofields last time.
So you kind of go up along that side of the state that borders Mississippi, up that
Yeah,
little straight edge up there. Gotcha,
yeah,
a little bit.
yeah.
So let's talk about this. Let's talk about how many people get to DC. They forget. It's almost like when people get to Washington D.C., they forget that they represent a congressional district. That they represent a district that's in their home state. They move to DC, they forget about the little people, and they get caught up in DC politics, and they forget that they need to represent the people in their district. It becomes a battle almost for power, because they're up there trying to jockey for positions in DC while they
Yep.
forget about the people in their own district. They forget about, they've got good intentions going there and they have good motivations, but they forget that they're representing their district. How are you going to navigate the system? How are you going to navigate that representation and finding your place in DC where your vote affects all of America too?
That's a great question, and that's what we see a lot of it. That's we get that question a lot. Like, how are you going to protect yourself?
Right.
That's the first question from buying into the corrupt system and becoming another face. Because a lot of people say, Larry, we help a lot of good people get elected, and then they change. I've been battle tested already, and serving on the local library board, advocating for lowering the budget when it was not popular by the 10,000 voters in my parish who voted for Kamala Harris, who are loud. It wasn't popular by them, but we are representative democracy. You don't get to determine as a minority what the
Mhm.
majority does. And I had to say that many times. So we lowered the library budget $5.5 million. Several members of the council were not strong enough to handle the heat, but a 26-year-old was. And so they removed the conservative board. I didn't change my values. I didn't give in. I was coerced and tried to be told to change the way that I voted to stay on the board. I said, you're out of your mind. Life and death is in the power of God. Why would I change for something that benefits the majority to make sure
Right.
that people like me better? That's not my job. My job is to do what is right at all times as a public servant. The first part of that, though, was to remove sexually explicit books from the library. There's no reason that children should be reading books about sexual topics. That's not the function of a library, nor should taxpayers go to fund the purchase of books
Mhm.
that detail these sexual things, no matter what it is. It doesn't need to be detailed. That's the problem with our culture today, which is why we're in a mental health, sexual promiscuity problem in our country. It's because of the books and things on television. So that first part is I don't change because I've read my Bible and
Mhm.
understand that there you can't make a heaven here on earth, and no matter how much you accumulate here, when you die, you die. You don't get to bring anything with you. So if I'm going to make a deal, it's going to be with my Lord and Savior Jesus Christ amongst everything. There's a
I'll
delicate balance that you have when you go to DC. You first have to make the relationships that are there. I am going to be bipartisan because in order to get some of my most what would be considered controversial legislation passed, like me and you discussed when we first got on here, it's about the messaging. So my goal is not to be on Fox News, Newsmax, MSNBC, and CDD. My job is to meet with the other representatives who are moderate like me, or not moderate like me, but who are moderate and they are quiet like me in the legislature. You don't hear from every representative in DC because there are actual ones who go there to go to work. They don't go there to get on the news. So my job is to meet with those moderate people from across our state. And the first bill that we're trying to legislate is the abolition of abortion. People say, oh, you ain't gonna get that passed. Everybody not for that. Well, it goes back to common sense. My job is to find that moderate individual and say it to them like this. Do you realize that if every person of your persuasion, if every far left individual aborted their child, the world would be full of Christian conservative people. And so while I may disagree with your viewpoint because it's wrong, you are deserving to be here on this earth. And to deny any child that opportunity to be here is wrong. It's selfish and it's
You,
hypocritical.
hypocritical.
Hypocritical. Help me.
Yeah, I don't
That
want to
comes
get
to
off.
you.
I don't want to get too far off on that
Yes.
subject right now,
So
but I do want to address something that may be relevant to your district. It's kind of like people who vote Democrat but don't realize they're more conservative than they are Democrat, and they don't realize that when they vote Democrat, they're actually working against themselves because they're more conservative and
yes.
right leaning. Then they realize it's the same with abortions. A lot of people that are Democrats, a lot of minorities, they support abortion rights, but they don't realize that the person who started Planned Parenthood was a eugenicist, and she was a racist, and she hated black people, and one of her reasons for starting Planned Parenthood was to, as she said, to get rid of the weeds of society.
Yes.
And a lot of people who support abortion don't realize that. And you're making a point right now to say, look, that's one of your priorities. Is that correct?
That's one of our priorities. But
Bob,
to shorten it up, to get back to your original question, it's just messaging. It's making sure that we go up there, build the relationships where the relationships are necessary to bring the resources back to the community.
So, all right. So now, when you get to DC, when you get to DC, you're going to be faced with not only the power struggle in DC, you're going to be faced with representing the people back home. You're going to be wrestling with your making your values a priority, and then you got to combine that with working with others. 400 something other legislators. You're going to be fighting narratives. You're going to be fighting votes, and who's in power. How are you going to navigate all of the narratives and all of those situations? How are you going to navigate all of that to not only vote your heart and your district, but how are you going to be able to vote the right thing for America? How are you going to fight against those narratives?
Dive deeper on the narratives, and because that's a lot there. So voting with the heart in America. So what do you mean specifically?
So I'll rephrase that because I sometimes I ask a long question. You're going to get up there, and there's going to, and right now we have a simple majority,
Yes.
and the Democrats are throwing out the narratives, to try to make the United States population think that they're the good guys and the Republicans are the bad guys. And the Republicans are up there voting values. They're voting ideas that are not only important to them and America, but their district. But every so often you see a couple of them peeling away, and every so often you see that they're voting against their values simply because they're voting by party. It's a very unique balance.
Mhm.
Okay. Now I will tell you this. Um, I've seen congressional districts where people say, well, they're voting against they're voting against America, or they're not, or voting against their party. But if you look at their districts, they're actually voting the way their
In line.
districts want them to vote. So there's a fine line there that you got to walk constantly between values, party, district, and country. You didn't see my questions, but yet you said something similar to that. And I'm just going to dive a little bit deeper on how you're
Yes.
going to navigate.
So the tripart question, how do I vote and represent my country, my district, and my personal core beliefs? That's easy. What my office wants to do when we win is we want to be as interactive and as virtual as possible. And so if there's ever a vote, so this is how it breaks down. How do I vote on social and moral issues? Is what scripture tells us, is what scripture dictates to us. How do I vote on economical issues? Common sense. What benefits the taxpayer? What lowers the threshold on spending? eliminating inflated spending and making sure that money is actually being spent on necessitated items. And then country, that's easy because what benefits America? And in our country right now, we are doing a lot of stuff that benefits other countries. We're building other countries. We're fighting for other countries. While we have poverty, while we have moms struggling, single moms struggling, while we have children struggling, and there are resources, children paying bills for their parents because their parents are on drugs and
Right.
they're working hours on end, but they are doing the responsible thing. They're going to work, but they don't go to school. And when that was told to me, I said, you know what? And we're funding illegal immigrants' kids when we have American children here suffering.
Right.
So it's a lot. I'm learning, and that's when I get excited. I'm like, Lord, this is good because it's not partisan. It's what the people need.
Right.
So it all encompasses the same thing. And like we talked about prior to the show, the main conversations that I'm having with the people across the district is all they want to see is representation. My ideas that I bring to them, because I'm very honest with people. I'm not going to these people, to these constituents and neighbors and saying, oh, yeah, I'm going to do this. I'm going to get you $50 million. That's illogical and it's not true. Congress doesn't work like that. I tell people like this, it's going to take us 2 to 3 election cycles to get on appropriations. There's a line for appropriations. But what the weight of our office provides is I get to get in the room with CEOs. I get to get in the room with entrepreneurs and business makers and investors and say, invest in CD6. Here's what we need. This is why this district is valuable. This is why this district is special. And I have the weight of that office to be able to do that. But a lot of people forget that Congress is established as a check and balance system of the president. We also appropriate dollars and investigate crimes. It's not as elaborate as a lot of people lie when they're running for office and make it seem like you can do all this stuff. No, it's a 3-part system that is that the majority of it, how it benefits the local constituency is advocacy. And so I don't think right now, living in Louisiana for all my life, everything that I believe, most of the constituency that I represent believe. And so I don't think there will ever be a time to where we're in conflict, but whenever I am not sure, I want to make sure that our office is accessible. There's a virtual option to where you can click, how do you feel about
Right.
this? Where do you want to see your money go? And I haven't seen that in too many places, but I want to invest in some type of software to where we're not mailing things, William, because
Right.
a lot of people don't get mail and then it's hard to mail it back. Then you have to buy a stamp. I want something that's texted, or we're going to figure it out, or where you can come to our congressional office and drop a little slip and my staff can let me know. We can sit down and say, okay, you had 100 people drop by the office today. They said no on this, and this is why. So we want to make it as interactive as possible, so that I never vote away on a non-moral issue that they don't want. You know.
I love this. Like I said, you're giving some really good insight on how you're going to walk that line between narratives and your morals and the party and your district. I think it's amazing that you actually were able to very articulate very well and separate it and realize that they're not always going to happen at the same time, and and what your priorities are. What do you see right now is the biggest threat to America?
The biggest threat to America is lack of priorities. And what I mean by that is, William, you can't give me a 1 point question when it's maybe three.
No, what's funny, I've given you some 3 or 4 point questions, kind of all wrapped up into one big introduction, and you're able to separate it out. I know now I'm giving you one question and you're going to separate it out. I love it.
um, it is the border is an issue, but what I mean by that is the president's done a phenomenal job of shutting it down. We got to stop funding these individuals. And somebody needs to stand flat-footed and say the Constitution. Look, you don't have to go to Harvard for this. The Constitution of the United States was written for Americans. You don't have to interpret. I am not a Harvard graduate, but I can guarantee you the founding fathers were not writing Constitution for rights to be expanded to foreigners. So whenever American interests are at risk in your interpretation of the Constitution, it's blasphemous and it's borderline treason. And we are now trying to expand rights to illegal immigrants that were not born here. That's wrong. Why is it that we still have high poverty in this country? Because we're funding everybody else but generational Americans whose families go back to the origins of this country, Black and white Americans. That's just me being real about it. We put generational Americans on the back burner, and we put foreigners on the heap. They get grants when they come into this country. That's why you have gas stations and nail salons. Americans don't get any grants to open businesses. It's outrageous. And we
Many
wonder why our communities suffer.
and many Democrats right now are voting, against the Department of Homeland Security. They're voting against ICE because they're saying, well, they're sending those immigrants back. But yet you're making a great point that the problem, that one of the biggest threats to America right now was the border and all the illegal immigrants that are here. We're taking care of them instead of taking care of our own people. And since we know now, you're telling me that that's one of your priorities on your mind. Your district should feel comfortable that when you're in DC, you might be voting against what most Democrats are voting for, or voting opposite, we'll say, but you're doing it because you believe the best interest to the people in your district and the people of America are voting, against illegal immigration, the things that are taking resources away from the people.
Taken away
Correct?
from their correct. They are taking vital resources that could be going to the constituents of CD6, and it's going to them. And then they ship it back home. They spend 10 years here, and then they move back to their home country millionaires. But I'll even tell you this right now, my Democrat opponent voted against the SAVE Act. The SAVE Act guarantees that voter registration is secured and that you have to present your ID and other things when you go vote. So you're telling me that a majority district that ethnicity wise is majority Black, you're saying that they have to follow more rights when they're pulled over by the police? Remember the big Black Lives Matter thing with law enforcement. You're saying that illegal immigrants get more rights than your constituency?
Right.
That's outrageous. And then my Democrat opponent voted against the Lake and Riley Act. So now you're saying that American citizens, it's okay if they get killed by illegal immigrants. So where is the focus truly happening when you're representing the current constituency? Because they are not on your heart and mind right now. The second part about the greatest threat to our country right now is we continue to allow Mexico to do what they want to do. We have the border crisis, we have the drug trade. I would have felt better if we would have done an excursion into Mexico than what we're doing now. We need to put American interest first. And I really don't know why it's that hard to do. We support the defense. I believe that America is strong enough to where we didn't need to preemptively attack anyone, that if they got ready to attack us, we would have been ready and we would have been able to strike with such force, they wouldn't be able to come back for centuries. Not that we need to proactively go in. I think our greatest threat is right down there at our southern border. I think our last greatest threat, to answer your question, is China.
Is
China
what?
makes everything.
China.
China makes everything. We can bring the jobs back to America. You talk about a manufacturing boom. This vest that I'm making, they should be required to open a factory here that American citizens are creating and sewing the vest. And we need to figure out how economically to make sure Americans are getting a living wage, which we can, in making clothes, making our shoes, Nike, making our iPhones. Because the very fact that China makes anything that we need is the dumbest thing that I think we could ever do foreign policy wise. We have to find a way to take back the lead and take back control over our products. This iPhone that we have, there is no telling what China has put in it when it was made overseas. We don't know, and nobody's checking. So we need to start putting American interests first, bringing manufacturing back here. making sure we cut illegal immigrants off of everything. I don't light switch it off, light switch it off, let them go back home and put the priorities of Americans first. Nobody's saying it, nobody's doing it, and it's wrong.
Now you brought up living wage. I'm going to let you explain that a little bit. You brought up living wage a minute ago. What do you mean by that?
So you know how the story is, well, Larry, we can't bring back shoe or clothing companies into America because in India they pay their people 25 cents. Well, we're not going to pay an American 25 cents. And so what does that look like? I can tell you, I don't know. I don't know. That's meeting with the companies to say, what can you afford to logistically pay if we were to get this done? And they said, you know what? You're right. America first. We need to start putting made in America on clothes again. What would that cost? And so I don't want to estimate that, but I do know that paying an American citizen 25 cents an hour, that ain't gonna
Make it
cut it.
work.
So
Right.
that ain't gonna work. So
Something
we need
reasonable.
to figure out.
It's something reasonable. So let's go. I'm gonna go back to immigration real quick too. I'm bound because I'm trying to do it in the order that you say it. So on immigration, I think one of the biggest problems in our country with immigration is that none of the politicians, Democrats, Republicans, presidents, have ever tried to redo our immigration system. I think our immigration system is out of date. Our immigration system is antiquated. It's not working. And I think one of the biggest problems that we have with immigration is because our system is broken, but nobody's doing anything about it. You get to DC, is that going to be on your mind?
Yes, one of the first pieces of legislation I want to do, which we're going to be doing a video about soon, we want to reopen Angel and Ellis Island. Because if it ain't broke, why fix it? That was something that we should have kept, because the mindset behind Angel and Ellis Island was to make sure that no one culture overpowered another. It was to organize immigration into our country. It was to make sure that we brought in no sicknesses, no disease. It was also a way to make sure families, that when these people came in, they were going into jobs. Where were they moving? We need to bring that back. I don't even know why we shut it down. I'll have to go back and reread my history on that, but we need to bring that back. And if you want to come to this country, we need to vet you, because we're already seeing the Muslim religion, which is unconstitutional. There's a reason Ben Carson said in our founding fathers, the Muslim religion should not be in our government. It's because their religion is totally against the Constitution. When they're in power, they want to force their religion on you. And you'll have people say, well, what about your Christian values? My Christian values say, do not murder, do not kill, that the church decides what the church does. We don't believe in
Your wife is your equal.
That your wife is your equal. We're not chastising what you wear and don't wear. The Lord gives you the Holy Spirit to convict what you need to wear and what you don't wear. But we're also, not trying to put in ecclesiastical laws. We're not trying to tell you to go to church on. That's not what Christians believe. The Muslim religion believes that, and you can just look at their communities in Minnesota to be able to determine that. But also, and Lord, with the immigration in those areas, it can be solved and remitigated if someone was actually serious. But I don't believe they're serious. Opening Angel and Ellis Island back, or building an Angel and Ellis Island, is not going to be billions of dollars, and it's not going to take 10 years. It's something that we can do quickly and efficiently. But we're also seeing that an overpowering of one culture is to overtake in America, and that is the Mexican culture. You go into Walmart now, you see Mexican milk. There's no Swahili. My ancestry goes back to Portuguese. There's no Portuguese aisle. There's no Irish aisle. There's no British aisle. But now we have Mexican aisles in our stores. That's not what this country is about. So we need to start mainstreaming that before we lose the very foundations of our country. And we can do that.
What do you see as the biggest problem in your district that may have gotten forgotten about? So I'm going back to district here. What's were
Yes,
the biggest problems in your district that people forgot about?
crime. That is the main thing that I hear from both sides of the aisle is crime. Um, and it's a two-prong approach to this. We're not getting as much enthusiasm in joining law enforcement because of the decades-long Black Lives Matter movement, and you cannot enforce the law on individuals. And we also see politicians getting in office and then demeaning law enforcement, and then the trust in local communities are eroded. Excuse me. We also see that where there is a lack of motivation to join a career like education, law enforcement, and healthcare, you start to get individuals who truly are not passionate about those three important fields. And so you see a lack of law enforcement. You see DEI being pushed in like Minnesota, I think Pennsylvania, their chief of police there was doing a music video to recruit, and that's not what we need of our law enforcement. So we did a another podcast that's out of Alexandria. And one of the things that I told him my job to do is to bridge the gap. And so I want to meet with and have a meeting with all of our local sheriffs and law enforcement throughout the district. I want to hear from them. I want to know, are you afraid to pull people over or enforce crime? Because I can tell you my frustration as an American citizen, William, is that I feel like the crimes for speeding are more enforced than the crimes for murder in our communities. I don't feel like those are taken care of. Armed robbery are not properly investigated.
And meanwhile, we've
Uh,
got legislation in Louisiana that they're trying to make using your cell phone in a public crosswalk illegal.
see,
And and
see,
and and we're talking. We got look. I got carjacked in LeCount 2 years ago. So I got into a gun battle with the carjacker in LeCount 2 years ago, and I'm hearing that they're trying to create laws where you can't use your cell phone in a crosswalk while you're walking down the road. So I hate. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but like
mm,
you're right. They're too busy creating laws that take law enforcement off of crime. And meanwhile, like you said, your communities, are all of our communities are fighting that. And LeCount is actually, I'm pretty sure, in your district.
district.
But how will you balance the interests of your district while working with the rest of Congress for America?
So that comes in getting on the right committees. So not every committee is as popular as appropriations. Um, and so it's building those relationships with the chairman and building those relationships with other committee members. We actually met with and started meeting with some of our colleagues that are running in CD5 in the Senate race, because my job is not to be partisan in that race. We know a good conservative is going to win in both of those races. So my office has already started building relationships and having meetings with all of the candidates, and whoever prevails, we're going to pray with and we're going to work with. And so all of those individuals in the Senate are fully educated on the system. And so one of them, with John Fleming working for the president, Letlow coming from Congress, Bill Cassidy been up there for the last, 2 terms he's been there, or 3 terms. They are all fully educated on the system. So I will be leaning on their wisdom on who to meet, where to go. And we've already started that process. And so that's the goal. We have wisdom there, but getting on the right committees, because agriculture is big in CD6. So making sure I have relationships with the ag committee members, the ag committee chairman, to see what resources can be built there, but also the ag secretary, Brooke Rollins, is doing an amazing job. She's going across the nation and she's building and starting initiatives in states and communities across the district. And just a sideway or segue onto this is something else that I said. When I represent the district, when I walk into the president's office or the cabinet's office, no matter no matter if the president's Joe Biden, no matter if the president's Donald Trump, my job is, I don't want them to see, oh, that's Larry Davis. He's a Republican. He's against. I want them to see that's Larry Davis, the representative of District 6. When you take an adversarial role against the people who have the power, that's what the Bible calls a lack of prudence. We have to have working relate. I don't have to vote with these people, get dinner and go to their daughter's birthday party. Our job is to work together. And in every job and career that any average American has, you have to work with people from all sides of the political and social spectrum. Our job is to make sure that our jobs together gets done. And so if I'm walking into these rooms and Brooke Rollins is appointed by our president now, and you've called the president all kind of names and wanted to put him in jail, you think she's going to take a meeting?
Nope.
Who does that benefit? That benefits you and your image and your ego.
Your Fox News interview, mate. Your Fox News interview, maybe.
Yeah, but your constituents lost. They're not getting the resources. And no matter if you like the president or not, that's 4 years of resources that you didn't get. I always use Katie Britt. Katie Britt, Alabama. She worked her way into having relations with the Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, the VP Vance, and the president. And she got a Secretary or Department of Defense contract in Huntsville, part of her district. That's the relationships that are required to be made to make sure that I'm bringing resources home for my district. And I think any president can respect, or any individual or cabinet member can respect a difference of party. But when you start attacking people personally because of the way that they vote, they're not going to be inclined to help you do anything, which is why you see some of these Democrat-held districts in the state destroyed. Because they can't even have proper disagreements with the governor or proper disagreements with the lieutenant. They just go on full attack mode, calling them racist, calling them that. He's not inclined to help your district because you're out there calling them every name in the book. And every other Republican-led district, they disagree with the governor and other officials in private, but they still get the resources for their community. That's the goal.
I love it. So basically, what I'm hearing too is that we have a Republican president, we have a Republican legislature, we have a Republican Senate, and if your district elects a Republican, not only are they going to have a person representing their values, they're going to have somebody who's looking to build bridges with the current administration to be able to help their district because they're of the same party. Would that be another way to kind of show you have a superpower almost? No, you're going to have extra. You're going to have extra power.
You hit the nail on the head. And with this seat, and spiritually we say it's providential, and this is going to do more for the faith community than anything. But in the worldly sense, this when we flip this seat will have so much authority and power, and remind every seat that is running, politicians and people who talk well and dress well, will show them the people are not stupid. And they are going to vote with their heart and with their mind. And that's what we're going to show everyone, because they're saying that we're going to lose the midterms. Why? Because we haven't changed anything. We're still running the same people. And like I said before, the people are not stupid. And on the two local elections that I worked on, two successful campaigns, Kelly Hennessy and Valerie Hodges, consistent, conservative individuals, they are effective. We ran that campaign against powerful incumbents. Why? And we won. Why? Because the people aren't stupid.
So Larry, I have a few more questions. I was asked one that I already know how you're going to answer it because you've kind of already they've already given the information, but I'm going to ask it only because I want to be consistent with all the other interviews I do for congressional interviews. But before I ask this question, I just thought of another one. We were talking about the midterms, talking about how everybody say, well, the Republicans could lose and the struggles or whatever. Do you think if the Republicans lose the midterms, will your district, if let's say you don't get elected, do you think your district will lose if you don't get elected and if Republicans don't win the midterms?
Yes, because now we're talking about, and just like we said, we don't attack my Democrat opponent personally. We're all human. We all fall short of the glory of God. But when you are elected to an office, you need to be effective. And this is an individual that doesn't have clout even in his own party. And so you're not even building relationships with the people in your own party. And so it's a loss for the district as a whole in both ways. Even if it's a win for my Democratic opponent, it's still a loss for the district because what he's not going to change in the next 2 years.
Okay,
And
so
so I'm so,
so I'm gonna stop you because that's gonna go off another question I have for you in a
oh
minute. But
yeah,
I'm gonna get to that question that I've asked everybody, but you've kind of already given some of these answers, but I'm gonna ask it anyway in case you have a different answer from what you've already said.
yeah.
What legislative ideas do you have that you believe will bring more people together on good ideas that have positive solutions for the future of America instead of the same old narratives that we keep hearing?
Ooh, that's actually good. No, I didn't touch on all of these. So we actually will be we will actually be talking about some legislation on child support,
Okay.
foster care support, agriculture, and bringing jobs and forcing contracts to be had by local businesses and franchises to buy local produce and local meat and things like that. So we have a lot of foster care, and the most important thing is maternal health and specifically Black maternal health, because 2/3 of Black women in our state lose their child or die because of giving birth. And that is unacceptable in a civilized modern society. And so some of those are some of the ones that are not polarizing that my team and my staff are fully focused on and ready to solve.
That's some very good information. I'm very I'm happy to hear you got your eye on some of that stuff.
Yeah.
Um, let's go to the bigger picture. What are some of your ideas on addressing the national debt?
Woo!
It's a big one, I know.
Yeah.
It's growing. I think a trillion a day or something now. No,
It's a trillion a day. And look, listen, Moon he listen, that man's a firecracker when it comes to the national debt. We just need to stop spending.
who's
And
that?
it goes back to what we said about illegal immigration. It goes back to these nonprofit, it goes back to the over federal spending on things. Now, in our lifetime, unfortunately, that won't be solved. It's gonna if we start now, eventually, maybe 2 generations down the line, we can solve it and cut back on it. But we are spending money on things that are unnecessary. And I'll go back just to make it a smaller example. When I served on that library board, we had people saying that they wanted to inflate the numbers so it looked like we were spending it. And I said, you do realize that's malfeasance. If that is happening at a local level in these tax-paid funded entities where they're not
Mhm.
being honest with the spending and inflating it to make it look like we're utilizing those resources, what do you think is happening nationally? And so we have to do investigations. Doge began to do a good work, but we didn't have the courage, the tenacity, and the girth to continue the fight.
Right.
And the normal average grassroots citizen sides with Doge. If you show them why, they side with it. You have to have the strength and the patience to explain it.
If we had
So
if we had a more fiscally responsible government, can you only imagine how much better and more efficiently we can help the people in our district in the districts? So tell me, in the most positive way, how do you think you will do a better job than your opponent in the most positive way possible?
yeah, talking and advocating. Being, like you said before, I think that was a perfect way to describe our policy agenda, being a bridge and not a wall. Advocating for them, not just in DC, but locally at their parish council meetings, at their police jury meetings, going up to the legislature, Democrat, Republican, whoever they elect locally, going up to the state capitol and talking with their legislators, making sure that we're passing laws that positively impact our district locally and statewide, that trickle up instead of down, because down is going to take time, but trickle up to where we are being an example for other states and other communities across the district. And that's it. That really is the main thing. It's nothing else. Advocating and being a present legislator, being a present congressman. I know the title is cool, but all I am is a man that's being called to work harder for people I don't know. That's it. But we've made this job so perk filled that individuals get there and they're so worried about the glamour and they're so worried about the power, and that's not it. I need to go to work for the people. Life's too short, and I
I
don't
love it.
listen. We can make 20 million all day, but just like I say, cancer is real. That's another thing too, William. We were talking about policy. We want to invest in cancer research. We are a civilized society. We're figuring
Mhm.
out AI, but we can't figure out the cure to cancer.
Right.
We're spending time researching preventable diseases like HIV and AIDS. We're spending federal dollars on those, but we're not trying to solve cancers and diseases that people don't bring on to themselves. Come on,
Right.
come on.
I got one more question for you, but before I ask the question, I want to remind my audience to look up the Great Southern Gun and Knife Show, because they have shows all over the southern part of Louisiana, and they are helping protect our Second Amendment rights. And if you go to the Great Southern Gun and Knife Shows.com, you'll find where their next show is. All right, Larry, my last question. Nobody gets out of my show without answering the question, which is, where do you think that we are losing freedom in America?
Hmm.
Oh, I know. Hey, look, you do most a lot of people. It's like they're
That's it.
recoiling from, they're feeling the freedom leaving their body almost. They're like, whoa, wait a minute.
I
And
have to
and
I have to go personal for this one.
okay.
Um, Freedom of belief. I've noticed that if you are a Christian conservative in our country today, you have to walk on eggshells with what you say. You have to, even in jobs today, I've heard from people, they're forced to watch education videos that go against their personal beliefs. There are no Christian, how to talk to a Christian and those kind of ethics videos that go on through corporate administrations, but there are on homosexuality, there are on other genders and races. And if you speak against that, you could lose your life. You could, I mean, your life and your career. And
If they keep letting the other population come in our country, we'll lose our lives.
we'll lose our lives. And that's already been shown with the president almost being shot, Charlie Kirk dying. And so we're, the loss of Christian conservative people, which is why good people don't run for office. And that's what I hear all the time. They're scared that their past is going to come out. And then they are afraid of people hurting them or their family. And I tell them all the time, let God order your steps, because the people that we allow in office now, they don't care about their past. They live in it, they relish in it, they win. And it's because nobody challenges them. And no sinner, no person on this earth is not a sinner. And we have all fallen short. It's not about how you start, it's about how you finish. It's about giving your life over to Christ and allowing him to do that transformational work um, in your life. And so that would have to be it, because I've seen it. I've lived through it. I've seen it in classrooms where I have been the only Christian conservative and literally in the classroom. I'm not being over the only Christian conservative in the classroom. And you don't find out. I found out in an intro to public law class last year where Charlie Kirk had just died, and the entire class said he deserved it because of what he said. And I had to ask that, if I disagree with what you just said, do I have a right to kill you for it? And it was as if you plugged the plug into the wrong outlet, the confusion. Um, and my professor told me after class, he said, Larry, he said, that was a scary day. I said, it is. So that would have
Exactly.
to be my answer.
Well, Larry, we're at the end of our interview, and I want to give you, is there anything you want to follow up with, wrap up with? I'm gonna let you have the floor for the mic for a couple seconds, and then I'm gonna sign off to the audience. But Do you have any final words as we wrap up?
William, just thank you for this opportunity. And to everybody listening to this show, we need you. There is still hope for America to revitalize and to come back stronger. And it starts one election at a time. My pledge to you is that I will always fight for you and for the values that built this country. In fact, that is the story of my life. I ask for your family to pray for me and my team and my family. I ask that y'all go to our Facebook, Larry Davis, to like and subscribe, and to our Instagram, Larry Davis for Commerce, and our X, like, subscribe, and share. And if you feel led to, change your voter registration to Republican. We need you. And thank you.
I love it. Larry, hang on one second. I want to thank the audience so much for listening to the show. Remind them that the show is brought to you by some great sponsors like Door Furniture. You can check them out in St. Tammany and also in Orleans. But even bigger and better, I would love it if you'd share the show. If you think
Yes.
you know somebody in the district in CD6 and they would like to know more about who's running, I think that Larry Davis is worthy of that share. And I'd be honored if you shared this interview with others and also follow my show. Thank you so much. And I will have another interview coming up very soon. Thank you so much. And God bless you and God bless the United States of America.